The first blush of dawn, faint as a whisper, painted the eastern sky with hues of bruised plum and rosewater. Within the quiet heart of the domus, a stillness lingered, broken only by the softest rustle of linen and the distant murmur of a slave preparing the morning brazier. Flavius, stirring on his couch, drew a breath of the cool air that had stolen in through the high windows, carrying with it the faint, clean scent of damp stone and the nascent promise of the city waking. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache of well-lived years, before rising with a slow, deliberate grace. The oil lamp, a small beacon in the dim cubiculum, cast dancing shadows on the painted frescoes that adorned the walls. Its gentle, earthy perfume mingled with the fainter aroma of wood smoke drifting from the kitchen hearth. A young slave, quiet as a shadow himself, placed a small earthenware cup of cool water and a platter of simple fare on a low table beside the lararium. Flavius offered a silent prayer to the household gods, the flickering light illuminating the small, carved figures, then broke off a piece of the day's fresh bread. It was coarse, warm, and comforting, a simple foundation for the day ahead, eaten alongside a handful of briny olives and a sliver of goat's cheese. The soft crunch of the bread was the loudest sound in the atrium, where the sky, now a pale lavender, began to unveil itself through the open roof, reflecting in the placid waters of the impluvium. He chose a plain white tunic of soft linen, its folds falling comfortably around him. There was no need for the formal toga yet. The morning was for the intimate rhythms of the household and the quiet obligations of a patron. Slaves moved with practiced ease through the domus, their hushed voices and soft footsteps barely disturbing the air. The faint, sweet scent of newly polished cedar drifted from the tablinum, where scrolls would soon be unrolled and wax tablets prepared. As the sun climbed, casting longer, softer shadows across the courtyard, the subtle shift in the city's symphony began. A distant creak of a cart wheel, the faraway cry of a hawker, the bark of a dog, muted sounds, carried on the gentle morning breeze, speaking of the forum's slow awakening. Soon, clients would begin to arrive for the salutatio, their sandals scuffing quietly on the street outside, their respectful murmurs preceding their entrance. Flavius settled himself in the atrium, awaiting them. His presence, calm and steady, was a familiar anchor for those who sought his counsel or his influence. He listened to their greetings, their quiet petitions, offering measured responses, a pillar of stability in their bustling lives. The morning passed in this gentle ebb and flow of interaction, a quiet dance of loyalty and obligation, underscored by the growing hum of the world beyond his walls. By the 6th hour, the sun hung high, a warm, golden presence that spilled freely into the atrium, warming the mosaic floor. The last of the clients had departed, their footsteps fading into the increasing crescendo of the city's midday life. The air grew still, heavy with the quiet anticipation of the day's zenith. For prandium, a light meal was brought, cold cuts of yesterday's roasted chicken, more bread, and ripe figs. Flavius ate slowly, content in the quiet respite, the sounds of the city now a steady thrum, a backdrop to his momentary peace. The afternoon, with its promise of the lively baths, stretched ahead, a welcome prospect after the gentle duties of the morning. The heat, though mild for now, whispered of the need for the cooling waters to come. The quiet bloom of dawn had softened the edges of the room, drawing back the veil of deep sleep with a touch as light as a moth's wing. It wasn't a sudden awakening, but a slow, deliberate unfolding from the warmth of the quilt, a gentle surfacing from the calm depths of unconsciousness. The air itself seemed to hold a hush, a delicate balance between the lingering coolness of night and the first promise of warmth from the burgeoning sun. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of damp earth and distant pine needles began to filter through the half-open window, a silent invitation to the world beyond the four walls. Stirring, not with urgency but with a soft curiosity, the body stretched, limbs unfurling like tendrils towards the diffused light. Each movement was a conscious choice, unhurried, as if to honor the stillness of the hour. The wooden floor, cool beneath bare feet, offered a grounding sensation, a tangible connection to the earth below. There was no thought of tasks or schedules, only the simple act of being, of feeling the quiet rhythm of breath and the slow pulse of the new day. Drawing back the curtain with a whisper of linen, the full vista of the early morning unfolded. The garden outside lay cloaked in a gossamer mist, the dew-kissed leaves of the hydrangeas shimmering like scattered jewels. A hesitant chorus of birdsong began to weave itself into the silence, a gentle symphony of chirps and trills, each note a declaration of life's enduring continuity. The sun, still a low arc above the distant hills, painted the sky in muted shades of rose and lavender, slowly brightening to a pale, hopeful gold. Stepping onto the small, worn porch, the air was cool and invigorating against the skin, carrying with it the clean, earthy fragrance of awakening soil. The world outside felt vast yet contained, a perfect little universe of growing things and soft sounds. A single bumblebee, heavy with nectar, buzzed lazily past, its velvet body a testament to the quiet industry of the morning. Each blade of grass, each unfurling bud, seemed to hold a tiny, sparkling droplet of dew, mirroring the vastness of the sky in miniature. Time, in this space, seemed to lose its customary urgency. It stretched and expanded, flowing like a slow river, allowing for every minute detail to be observed, savored, and absorbed. The way the light shifted, imperceptibly, deepening the greens of the foliage, making the white blossoms glow with an inner luminescence. The rustle of a squirrel in the oak tree, a brief, sharp sound quickly reabsorbed into the overarching piece. It was a moment not of contemplation in the analytical sense, but of pure presence, a gentle sinking into the deep comfort of the natural world. There was a profound sense of welcome in the air, a feeling of belonging that settled deep within, like a stone finding its true resting place in a riverbed. The morning continued its unhurried progression, holding out a promise of simple joys and quiet revelations, a segment of time dedicated solely to the quiet art of living. And so, the quietude lingered, a soft, unwavering presence that settled into the very fabric of the afternoon. It was not a silence born of absence, but rather one rich with the subtle symphony of the world at its most unhurried. The gentle hum of distant insects, a sound so faint it merely softened the air rather than pierced it, wove itself into the deeper stillness, like threads of fine silk disappearing into a vast, calming tapestry. Sunlight, having performed its earlier, more vigorous dance across the high windows, now softened its approach. It no longer streamed in assertive beams but rather diffused through the ancient glass, spreading itself like a thin, golden wash across the aged floorboards. Each mote of dust, caught in this benevolent glow, seemed to awaken, performing its own slow, individual ballet, a silent, ephemeral drift that spoke volumes of time's gentle passage. These tiny, sparkling particles, invisible moments before, now glittered like scattered jewels, each one a miniature star in a transient galaxy, reflecting back the light in 1,000 tiny, unhurried winks. The air itself felt thicker, imbued with the scent of old wood and something vaguely botanical, perhaps the memory of rain on leaves or the subtle fragrance of dried petals long since faded from their bloom. It was a smell that invited a deep, settling breath, expanding the lungs with a sense of peace rather than urgency. There was no rush here, no pressing demand for attention. The world outside, with its ceaseless turning and its hurried commitments, felt wonderfully remote, a far-off whisper that merely confirmed the sanctuary of the present moment. Shadows, too, were part of this quiet unfolding. They stretched and elongated with a patience that transcended human understanding, creeping along the walls, deepening the corners, and slowly consuming the lighter patches of floor. They were not dark or menacing, but rather soft, velvety forms, shifting companions that redefined the room's contours with each passing quarter hour. A chair, previously bathed in bright light, now found half its form gently veiled, its lines softened, its presence made more mysterious and inviting. A book left open on a table, its pages now half obscured, seemed to whisper secrets only the shifting light could fully comprehend. The only movement was this gradual, imperceptible transition, the quiet changing of light and shade, a slow, deliberate waltz performed by the sun and the earth. One could sit for hours, lost in the simple observation of these shifts, feeling the gentle ebb and flow of the day as if it were a tide against a distant, serene shore. There was a profound comfort in this unhurried pace, a reminder that much of life's true beauty lies not in acceleration, but in the spaciousness afforded by stillness, in the quiet unfolding of each precious, passing moment. It was a meditation not of effort, but of simple, open reception, allowing the tranquil energies of the afternoon to seep into the very core of one's being, leaving behind a residue of pure, unadulterated calm. The quiet held its breath, fragile, easily disturbed yet steadfast in its present embrace. It was the kind of quiet allowing the faintest whispers of the house to emerge, the settling of old timber, the almost imperceptible hum of a distant refrigerator, the soft murmur of wind tracing paths along the eaves. Each sound, gentle as it was, served not to break the silence but to deepen it, proving its vastness through counterpoint. Through the window, the day began its slow undressing. Morning's sharp edges had long softened into a diffused glow, then a mellow warmth. Now, light stretched, lengthening shadows across the floor, painting the walls with deeper, richer hues. It was a gradual relinquishing, a letting go of the day's earlier certainties, preparing for evening's velvet descent. There was no urgency in this transition, only a seamless, almost imperceptible drift. This unhurried progression, this gentle yielding of one moment to the next, mirrored a deeper truth within. Life, too, unfolds in such patient increments, not in grand, dramatic gestures but in the quiet accumulation of small perceptions, fleeting feelings, and unbidden thoughts. We often seek the monumental, the striking event that redefines our path, yet it is in these overlooked interstices, the spaces between loud declarations, that true being resides. It is in the way dust motes dance in a solitary beam of sunlight, or the particular scent of rain on dry earth, or a beloved book's feel in the hand. These are the anchors, the subtle assurances in a world that often demands our frantic attention. Seeing them, feeling them resonate, requires inner stillness, a deliberate turning away from the clamor. It is a posture of receptivity, an invitation for quiet revelations. And when they do not arrive with fanfare, but with the softness of a sigh, a gentle shift in the air, a warmth spreading through the chest that feels like recognition. There is profound comfort in understanding that not everything needs a label, not every feeling immediate explanation, not every moment seized and dissected. Some experiences are meant to simply exist, to be absorbed without analysis, like a body accepting warmth from a fading sun, or a mind accepting the patterns of clouds drifting across an endless sky. Allowing these moments their full, unadulterated presence participates in a larger rhythm, one that hums beneath the surface of daily life, connecting us to something vast and enduring. This connection is not grand revelation, but quiet, almost domestic understanding. It is the realization that the same gentle forces shaping the light outside, guiding a forgotten seed, are also at work within us. We are part of this slow unfolding, these subtle shifts. Our own inner landscapes, too, are painted by the passage of time, by quiet erosion of certainty, and gradual blossoming of new perspectives. There is a grace in this acceptance, a liberation from the ceaseless demand to always be more, better, or elsewhere. Instead, we are simply here, in this breath, in this moment, bathed in whatever light is given. And in that simple acceptance, a peace settles, not a peace born of absence or indifference, but a deep, resonant peace that acknowledges the ongoing dance of light and shadow, within and without, and finds it, after all, quite beautiful. The late afternoon sun, a benevolent eye in the Roman sky, began its slow descent, painting the western horizon in hues of rose and amber. Within the grand, yet intimately designed, private baths of Hadrian's sprawling villa at Tivoli, a quiet serenity already reigned. The air, still carrying the warmth of the day, was softened by the gentle whispers of water and the faint, sweet breath of heated marble. Emperor Hadrian, his mind a tapestry of imperial decrees, architectural visions, and philosophical ponderings, sought the ancient solace of the bath. He moved with a quiet dignity, his footsteps muted by the thick, patterned rugs that adorned the antechambers. The transition from the demands of governance to the embrace of personal ritual was a deliberate, cherished act, a shedding of the world's heavy mantle. In the apoditarium, the changing room, the cool touch of polished Laconian marble underfoot was the first welcome. His simple, unadorned toga was carefully laid aside, revealing the contours of a man who carried the burdens of an empire with an enduring grace. Attendants, moving with the practiced quietude of shadows, offered a clean linen wrap, its texture light against the skin. No hurried words, no urgent demands, only the rhythmic hush of breath and soft movement. The path led next to the tepidarium, the warm heart of the bathing journey. Here, the air was a soft embrace, a balm to weary limbs and an easing prelude to deeper heat. Light, filtered through high, arched windows, danced in golden motes within the steam, illuminating the subtle veins of imported stone and the intricate mosaic patterns on the floor. Hadrian settled onto a bench, allowing the gentle warmth to permeate his very being, feeling the subtle loosening of tension that had coiled within his muscles. The distant, muted murmurs of the villa's life faded into an indistinct hum, leaving only the soft sigh of water in nearby basins. From this tranquil warmth, the journey continued into the caldarium, the room of intense heat and pervasive steam. Here, the air was thick, moist, and deeply invigorating, carrying the faint, clean scent of warmed stone and the delicate perfume of olive oil. Droplets of condensation glistened on the walls, catching the soft glow of the lamps that had been lit as dusk began to gather outside. Hadrian stood for a time, allowing the profound heat to open his pores, to coax out the residue of the day's anxieties. An attendant approached with a small flask of the finest olive oil, gently anointing his skin, the smooth, rich liquid spreading with a soothing touch. Then, with a crescent-shaped bronze strigil, the attendant began the careful, rhythmic scraping, lifting away impurities, a gentle exfoliation that spoke of cleansing not only of the body, but of the spirit too. Each stroke was deliberate, unhurried, a silent conversation between skilled hands and receptive skin. Finally, the invigorating plunge into the frigidarium's cool depths. After the pervasive heat, the water was a shock, but a clarifying, reawakening one. The initial gasp quickly gave way to a sense of crisp invigoration, a vibrant renewal that tingled through every nerve ending. Emerging, water sheeting from his body, Hadrian felt remarkably lucid, his mind clear, as if freshly polished. Back in a quiet anointing room, the unctuarium, fragrant oils were gently massaged into his skin, subtle blends of lavender and rose, calming and restorative. The entire ritual, from the first cool touch of marble to the final fragrant caress of oil, was a symphony of sensation, a journey into profound stillness. Clad once more in soft linen, Hadrian felt a deep, quiet contentment bloom within him. The world outside, with its endless demands, could wait. For now, there was only the lingering warmth, the refreshed spirit, and the quiet dignity of a soul made anew by the gentle art of Roman bathing. Segment 2.2. The morning light, a soft, pale gold, crept across the floorboards. It wasn't the vibrant, aggressive light of high noon, but something more hesitant, almost shy, as if still unsure of its welcome. Dust motes, tiny specks of forgotten life, drifted lazily within its gentle beams, performing a slow, silent ballet that only the patient observer might notice. Each one, an infinitesimally small universe, caught for a fleeting second in the sun's embrace, then gone, absorbed back into the vast, unseen currents of the air. It was a dance of impermanence, yet oddly comforting in its ceaseless repetition. A quiet hum filled the room, not from any machine, but from the deep, gentle stillness that settled after the first blush of dawn. Outside, a single bird offered a tentative, liquid trill, a delicate thread of sound woven into the tapestry of silence, then subsided. There was no urgency, no demand, simply the quiet unfolding of a new day. The air itself felt soft against the skin, carrying the faint, sweet scent of lingering dew and damp earth, a promise of warmth to come without the immediate burden of its full arrival. One could spend hours in this space, simply watching the light shift, feeling the air breathe. The world outside, with its clamor and its ceaseless turning, seemed to recede, becoming a distant echo. Here, time softened, losing its sharp edges, becoming less a progression of seconds and minutes, and more a permeable membrane through which one could drift. Memories, not vibrant and demanding, but quiet and warm, floated to the surface, like forgotten leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. A kindness once received, a quiet moment shared, the feeling of rain on a distant afternoon. They were not to be grasped or held tightly, but allowed to simply be, to bloom softly in the mind's quiet garden, then fade again. The warmth on the floorboards intensified, no longer just a visual presence but a tangible comfort, inviting one to imagine the texture of ancient wood, smoothed by countless steps and forgotten stories. There was a quiet wisdom in such old things, a patient resilience that spoke of having weathered countless seasons, countless sunrises and sunsets. They held a silent history not of grand events, but of quiet continuities, the slow wear of footfalls, the subtle bleaching of light, the whisper of dust gathering and dispersing. To truly notice such things, one had to slow down, to quiet the insistent chatter of the mind. It required a deliberate letting go, an unclenching of the mental fist that often gripped tightly to plans, worries, and expectations. Only then could the subtle symphony of the ordinary reveal itself. The way a shadow lengthened almost imperceptibly, tracing the passage of the sun across the sky. The way the distant hum of the world occasionally swelled, then receded, like a tide of sound. The way a small, unnoticed spiderweb, strung between the window frame and a forgotten curtain hook, shimmered with iridescence as the light caught its delicate threads. These were the moments that nourished, not with grand revelations, but with quiet peace. They offered a gentle reminder that beauty resided not always in the spectacular, but often in the overlooked, the small, the transient. In the dance of dust motes, in the silent growth of light, in the simple act of being present, one could find a profound and tender solace. It was a solace that didn't demand understanding, only quiet acceptance, a gentle surrender to the slow, unfolding rhythm of the world. And in that surrender, there was a quiet, almost imperceptible joy, like the first hesitant bloom of a spring flower, unnoticed by most, but deeply felt by the one who took the time to truly see. The sun, having climbed to its midday peak, now began its slow, unhurried slide towards the western horizon. Its light, once crisp and defining, softened into a more diffuse glow, painting the edges of the old wooden frame with a mellow warmth. Dust motes, suspended in the air like tiny, forgotten stars, caught the amber rays and danced a slow, silent ballet, visible only in these fleeting moments of perfect illumination. There was no urgency in their movement, no rush to be somewhere else, merely an existence within the golden shafts, an ephemeral presence that would fade as the light itself withdrew. One's mind, too, seemed to mimic this gentle descent. Thoughts that had buzzed with the day's earlier errands and responsibilities now quieted, settling like silt at the bottom of a clear pond. A profound sense of release often accompanied this particular hour, a subtle shedding of the day's weight, leaving behind only the quiet hum of existence. The world outside, too, seemed to respond to this silent command for repose. The usual distant rumble of traffic softened, becoming a mere murmur, a lullaby from afar. The occasional chirping of a late afternoon bird sounded less like a call to action and more like a gentle sigh. It was in these spaces, these quiet interludes between the sharp definition of morning and the deep embrace of night, that a different kind of understanding unfolded. Not the understanding gained from facts or figures, but a deeper, more intuitive knowing, a subtle resonance with the rhythm of things. The very air itself seemed to grow thicker, imbued with the scent of damp earth and the faint, sweet perfume of blossoming jasmine carried on the lightest of breezes. One could almost feel the earth turning, a vast, ancient mechanism moving with an imperceptible slowness, carrying everything upon its surface through the vast expanse of space. There was a comfort in this thought, a profound sense of belonging to something immeasurably larger and more enduring than oneself. To simply be, without agenda or expectation, was a luxury often overlooked in the hurried pace of modern life. Yet, it was precisely in these moments of stillness that life's most profound truths seemed to reveal themselves, not through grand pronouncements, but through the delicate unfurling of a fern frond, the patient waiting of a spider in its web, or the way a cloud drifted, shapeless and free, across the vast canvas of the sky. Each small observation became a tiny key, unlocking a deeper appreciation for the intricate dance of life, for the quiet resilience embedded in every growing thing. The shadows lengthened, stretching their cool fingers across the floor, reclaiming the spaces where the sun had briefly touched. The warmth lingered on the surfaces, a memory of the light's embrace. Soon, the twilight would begin its slow bleed across the sky, painting it in hues of lavender and rose, a final, tender flourish before the stars began to prick through the deepening blue. And as the day gracefully bowed out, there remained a quiet certainty, a peaceful assurance that the gentle rhythm would continue, that the world, in its patient turning, would offer another quiet morning, another mellow afternoon, another opportunity to simply witness and be. This unfolding, unhurried and ever-present, was a comfort beyond words, a soft anchor in the flux of existence. The light, it seemed, had always fallen in this particular way, a quiet seep across the floorboards, painting them in shifting hues of gold and amber as the afternoon deepened. It was not a sudden burst, but a deliberate, almost tender unfolding, a slow surrender of the day's brightest energies to a softer, more reflective glow. One could feel its presence more than see its source directly, a warmth emanating from the very air, settling on the skin like a light, comforting blanket. The hum of the world beyond the window became a distant murmur, fading into the background of a deeper silence. Sounds that might ordinarily assert themselves, the faraway chug of a lawnmower, the sharp chirp of a bird, were now cushioned, their edges softened by the expanding quietude. It was as if the very atmosphere thickened, absorbing harshness and leaving only a gentle resonance behind. The only truly clear sound was the rhythmic, almost imperceptible whisper of the old grandfather clock in the hall, its steady beat a soft reassurance, marking the passage of moments without urgency, merely acknowledging their graceful flow. This particular quality of light, this descending hush, often invited a similar quiet within. Thoughts, usually a restless flock, found themselves settling on a branch, content to observe the unfolding stillness rather than take flight. There was a profound solace in this absence of pressing urgency, a permission to simply be, without agenda or demand. One could trace the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams, tiny universes suspended in the air, each catching the light for a fleeting, brilliant instant before dissolving back into the larger, unlit space. It was a meditation without effort, a natural turning inward that felt less like a conscious decision and more like the gentle pull of a tide. A faint scent, perhaps of dry leaves or distant earth, drifted on the slight movement of air that stirred the curtains. It was a smell deeply rooted in memory, not of a specific event, but of a general sensation of calm, of autumn afternoons and quiet mornings. This subtle fragrance wove itself into the visual tapestry of the fading light, creating a multisensory embrace that held the present moment in perfect suspension. There was no need to name it, no need to define it. Its simple existence was enough, a quiet affirmation of the interconnectedness of all things. The shadows began to stretch longer, reaching out from the corners of the room, dissolving the crisp edges of furniture into softer, more ambiguous forms. The world was slowly blurring, transitioning from the defined clarity of day to the gentle mystery of twilight. It was a beautiful dissolution, not a loss, but a transformation into something less demanding, more yielding. The mind, too, felt this softening, allowing worries to recede, becoming indistinct like the encroaching shadows. There was a lightness that settled in the chest, a quiet joy found in the simple act of breathing, of existing within this peaceful frame. There would be no rush to light the lamps. The last vestiges of the day's warmth still lingered, a tender touch on the skin, and the emerging darkness was not a void but a new kind of presence, full of its own unique, hushed promises. It was enough, for now, to sit and let the final moments of the sun's embrace fade, to feel the quiet surrender of the land, and to allow that same gentle surrender to settle deep within one's own heart, preparing it for the quiet contemplation that the evening would surely bring. The air in the Roman baths, even in memory, always seems to carry a certain warmth, a humid peace. One can almost hear the soft splash of water, the low murmur of conversation, the gentle scraping of strigils, a world of ordered tranquility and communal ritual. We've drifted through the caldarium's heat, lingered in the tepidarium's balm, and felt the cool embrace of the frigidarium, understanding much of the rhythm of these grand institutions. Yet, even in the most thoroughly excavated foundations, beneath the well-trodden mosaic floors and beside the enduring hypocaust pillars, there are whispers, faint echoes of practices that elude our neat categories, mysteries that prefer to remain shrouded in the warm mists of time. One such quiet enigma comes to light not from grand inscriptions or dramatic hoard finds, but from a persistent, almost shy presence in certain bath complexes across the province of Britannia, particularly notable near the sacred springs of Bath. Archaeologists have, over the decades, come across small, perfectly ovoid stones. They are consistently palm-sized, no larger than a pigeon's egg, uniformly dark, obsidian, polished basalt, or a dense, river-smoothed flint. Their surface is always remarkably smooth, almost sensuous to the touch, as if centuries of handling had worn away any imperfection. What makes them peculiar is their context. They are almost invariably found nestled alone, often in a small, shallow depression or a meticulously carved niche within a less frequented alcove, or sometimes, surprisingly, at the very bottom of a specific, small basin that shows no signs of active water flow, separate from the main bathing pools. Unlike the myriad votive offerings, coins, trinkets, curses scratched on lead tablets, these stones bear no inscription, no identifying mark, no discernible artistic carving. They are just stones. Nor do they appear to be tools. Their form offers no practical function that aligns with known bathing implements or household items. They are never found in groups, never part of a larger collection, always singular, seemingly placed with deliberate intention. Were they left behind accidentally by a forgetful bather? The sheer number of such finds across multiple sites, and their consistent, almost ritualistic placement, argues against simple oversight. They suggest a purpose, a silent gesture, a private moment observed in the public space of the baths. Did these smooth, dark ovoids serve as personal tokens, perhaps carried into the baths as a focus for meditation or prayer before being quietly left behind? Were they a subtle offering to a forgotten genius loci, a spirit of a specific spring or a unique aspect of the water's power, different from the more widely acknowledged deities? Perhaps they were a form of mnemonic, a tangible anchor for a particular thought or a silent petition, released from the mind and left to linger in the hallowed space. Or could they have been connected to a highly personal, even esoteric, stage of the bathing ritual, a moment of profound introspection or purification known only to a select few, a practice too intimate to be overtly recorded? The stones themselves offer no answers. They lie, now carefully catalogued in museum drawers, as silent and smooth as the day they were placed. Their purpose remains veiled, a gentle whisper in the architectural grandeur of the Roman baths. They remind us that for all our understanding, some aspects of the ancient Roman soul, their quiet beliefs and personal rituals, have slipped through the cracks of time, leaving behind only the most enigmatic of traces, waiting for a sleepy curiosity to ponder what unseen hands once placed them, and for what unvoiced desire. The mystery lingers, a cool, dark stone nestled in the palm of our historical imagination. Segment 3.2. The soft hum of the world, often unheard amidst the clamor, persists. It is a subtle vibration, a quiet frequency that resonates only when one stills the hurried pulse of the day and listens. In this gentle pause, the delicate threads of existence reveal themselves, not with a flourish, but with the quiet unfolding of a blossom in the morning light. There is no urgency in this revelation, only a patient invitation to observe, to feel, to simply be present within the unhurried current of time. Consider the way light fades at the close of an afternoon. It does not vanish abruptly, but rather withdraws with a grace that is almost imperceptible moment by moment. The golden warmth shifts to a softer ochre, then to a muted rose, before deepening into the vast indigo of twilight. Each shade transitions into the next with an unhurried surrender, painting the world anew without a single brushstroke of haste. This quiet relinquishing, this gentle letting go of the day, holds a profound lesson. It speaks of a natural rhythm, a flow that asks nothing of us but our quiet acknowledgement. To align with this rhythm is to find a certain peace. It means allowing thoughts to drift like clouds across an open sky, observing their form without attachment, letting them dissipate as gently as they appeared. There is no need to grasp at them, to dissect their meaning with an analytical mind, but rather to simply witness their passage. In this spaciousness, a different kind of understanding begins to bloom, one that is felt more deeply than it is articulated. It is the wisdom of the quiet heart, unburdened by the constant need for definition or control. This gentle attunement extends to our very being. We are, in essence, a reflection of these same natural processes. Our breath rises and falls, a steady, unwavering tide within us, mirroring the ocean's quiet ebb and flow. Each inhale is an acceptance, each exhale a release. There is a profound simplicity in this act, a constant renewal that grounds us in the present moment. When we consciously bring our awareness to this inherent rhythm, the subtle anxieties of the mind begin to soften, much like the edges of a photograph blurring into a harmonious whole. Such moments of quiet contemplation are not escapes from the world, but rather deeper immersions into its truest nature. They are opportunities to recalibrate, to shed the unnecessary layers of tension and expectation that accumulate throughout our days. It is in these gentle spaces that clarity often emerges, not as a sudden flash, but as a slow, unfolding realization, like the opening of a familiar path under the clearing mist. The answers we seek are seldom found in the clamor, but often whispered in the stillness, carried on the softest breeze. And so, we learn to cultivate a softness within ourselves, a willingness to meet the world not with resistance, but with a gentle openness. To navigate the complexities of life with the same grace as the fading light, allowing each transition to unfold in its own time. There is a deep comfort in this approach, a quiet strength that emanates from understanding that everything has its season, its own pace. To honor this is to live in harmony, not just with the external world, but with the gentle, persistent hum of our own inner landscape, forever inviting us to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. The afternoon light had begun its slow descent, no longer harsh or direct, but diffused through the ancient glass, painting the dust motes in the air with a soft, ethereal glow. It laid itself across the worn wooden floorboards, highlighting the delicate grain, the faint scuffs of countless years, each mark a silent testament to lives lived within these walls. The air itself felt thick with stillness, a quiet hush that seemed to absorb any stray sound, leaving only the faintest whisper of the wind outside, a sigh brushing against the eaves, barely audible. Time, in this gentle chamber, seemed to stretch and thin, losing its sharp edges, becoming an almost liquid presence. One could feel its passage not as a relentless march, but as a slow, deliberate unfolding, like the quiet blossoming of a night flower, or the almost imperceptible drift of a cloud across a vast sky. There was no urgency here, no clamor for attention, just the soft breath of existence, content in its own unhurried rhythm. A single ray of this softened light found its way to a forgotten teacup on the small, polished table. It illuminated the intricate pattern along its rim, a delicate tracery of faded gold leaves that spoke of a different era, a different hand that had once held it. The ceramic felt cool to the touch, a subtle contrast to the ambient warmth that seeped through the room. One might trace the slight chip on its edge with a fingertip, a small imperfection that only added to its quiet narrative, a story of gentle wear rather than sudden breakage. Outside the window, beyond the pale lace curtain that swayed almost imperceptibly with the breath of the day, the garden was deepening into shadow. The greens of the leaves, once vibrant, now took on richer, more muted tones, preparing for the quiet surrender to dusk. A lone bird, hidden amongst the dense foliage, offered a solitary, unhurried chirrup, a sound so perfectly woven into the silence that it scarcely disturbed it. It was merely another thread in the tapestry of the fading day, a soft punctuation mark in the lingering peace. The world outside felt distant, a gentle hum just beyond the threshold of awareness. Here, within these quiet walls, the focus narrowed to the immediate, the tangible, the small wonders of a fading afternoon. The scent of old paper and dust, mingled with a faint, clean fragrance of drying linen from a neighboring yard, drifted on the air, subtle and comforting. It was the scent of a long-settled space, a place where memories had accumulated like the very dust motes, quiet and undisturbed. One's gaze might drift from the teacup to a nearby bookshelf, its rows of spines, some faded, some cracked, promising untold stories. They stood as silent sentinels, holding within them worlds yet to be discovered or revisited, waiting patiently for the moment of quiet contemplation. There was no pressure to engage, no need to rush into their narratives. Their presence alone was a comfort, a quiet assurance of endless possibilities, much like the slow promise of the approaching evening. The air grew cooler, signaling the shift, a gentle hand guiding the day towards its restful conclusion. The light continued its gentle retreat, pulling the long shadows like soft cloaks across the room, wrapping everything in an even deeper tranquility. Soon, only the soft glow of twilight would remain, a final, tender embrace before the deep quiet of the night. The light, now softened to a gentle blush, lingered, painting the quiet corners of the room in hues of apricot and rose. It stretched thin, a silken veil drawn across the worn surfaces of the antique chest, touching the dust motes that danced in its dying embers, each particle a tiny, fleeting star in its own universe. There was no urgency in this fading, no sudden rush into shadow, but rather a slow, deliberate surrender, a quiet sigh as the day prepared to yield its reign. A profound stillness settled, deeper than mere silence. It was a quality that absorbed sound, muffling the distant murmur of the world outside, leaving only the softest whispers of the house itself. Perhaps a faint creak from the floorboards above, a settling sigh from the timbers that had stood for generations, or the almost imperceptible rustle of fabric as a gentle current of air, too slight to be called a breeze, stirred near the window. Each sound was less an intrusion and more an affirmation of the quiet, a subtle pulse within the heart of the hush. One could feel the air growing cooler, a tender embrace against the skin, hinting at the coming night without demanding attention. It carried with it the faint, earthy scent of damp soil from the garden, mingled with a delicate, almost imperceptible fragrance of unseen blooms. These were not powerful perfumes, but fragile essences, carried on the breath of the evening, weaving a tapestry of scent that only revealed itself to a patient, unhurried awareness. To breathe it in was to inhale the very essence of tranquility, a gentle balm for the weary spirit. There was a peculiar comfort in this liminal space, this suspended moment between day and night. It invited a gentle drift of thought, not a whirlwind of ideas, but a slow, meandering current, like a quiet stream flowing through a sun-dappled meadow. Memories, not sharp or poignant, but soft and blurred at the edges, might float to the surface, like leaves carried on that stream, only to gently recede again, leaving behind a faint warmth. There was no need to grasp at them, no desire to hold them tight. Their transient presence was enough. The world outside the window began to transform, losing its distinct edges, blurring into an impressionistic canvas of deeper tones. Trees became dark, sinuous shapes against the ever-darkening sky, their branches reaching out like ancient, gnarled fingers. The distant hills, once clearly defined, now melted into the indigo horizon, becoming part of the boundless expanse that stretched above. Even the first faint pinpricks of light, emerging timidly in the heavens, seemed to deepen the sense of vastness, emphasizing the small, sheltered world within the room. To simply sit, unmoving, and allow this gentle transition to unfold was a luxury, a conscious act of embracing the unhurried rhythm of time. It was to feel oneself become part of the quiet decay of light, the gradual deepening of shadow, the subtle shift in temperature, and the whisper of the growing dark. There was no sense of loss in the departing day, but rather a serene anticipation of the quiet peace that night would bring, a promise of rest and renewal in the soft, enveloping stillness. The silence deepened, cradling the world in its soft embrace, an unspoken lullaby for the soul. Segment 4.1. While the grand therme of Rome pulsed with the vigorous rhythm of communal life, a vibrant mosaic of voices, splashing water, and the purposeful tread of 1,000 sandals, a different ritual unfolded within the sequestered walls of a patrician villa high on the Alban Hills. Here, the pursuit of bodily comfort was not merely an art, but a meticulously engineered state of being, utterly insulated from the city's robust demands. The central feature of such a residence was often not a grand atrium, but a private bathing suite, scaled for one or perhaps two discreet occupants. Unlike the soaring, echoing halls of the public baths, these chambers were intimate, the light often filtered through thin sheets of alabaster or stained glass, casting a soft, diffused glow upon surfaces of polished obsidian and veined Parian marble. The air, devoid of the communal steam's earthy musk, carried only the faintest whisper of Cypriot cedar and the subtle, singular perfume of the owner's preferred oils. Entry to this personal sanctum was not through a bustling palestra, but a silent passage, perhaps lined with hushed mosaics depicting mythical rivers or tranquil gardens. Within, the tepidarium was less a warming room and more a waiting chamber, where the body gradually relinquished the day's residual tension on a cushioned daybed, while unseen hands smoothed away the fine dust of travel and prepared the skin for deeper immersion. The true luxury, perhaps, was the profound quiet, broken only by the gentle sigh of water being drawn from subterranean springs, meticulously heated and channeled to a perfectly calibrated temperature. The caldarium here was not a cavernous, steamy grotto, but a compact, luminous space, often ringed by slender columns of imported marble. The air hung heavy with a gentle warmth, and the water, poured from a silver ewer, enveloped the bather without the jostle of another's presence. No communal scraping or vigorous toweling here. Instead, specially trained slaves, moving with the practiced grace of shadows, administered the unguents. A rare oil, perhaps derived from saffron and myrrh, would be gently massaged into the skin, its fragrance blooming subtly in the heat, never overwhelming. The transition to the frigidarium was equally refined. This small, cool pool, often lined with dark, reflective stone, offered a crystalline clarity that seemed to still the mind as much as the body. A single, silent attendant might offer a cool, sweetened wine or a cup of herbal infusion, served in a delicate glass. The culmination was less about invigoration and more about a profound sense of self-containment, a quietude achieved through the meticulous exclusion of the external world. Stepping out, wrapped in the finest Egyptian linen, into a quiet anointing room, the sense of perfected isolation was complete. The absence of others was not a lack, but the very essence of the experience. Here, status was not displayed through the grandeur of shared space, but through the unparalleled control over one's private domain, a gilded cage of exquisite comfort, where every breath, every touch, every scent was curated to an exquisite, and perhaps ultimately solitary, perfection. It was a testament to a different kind of ritual, measured not by the pulse of the crowd, but by the quiet hum of unobtrusive privilege. The hush, once merely an absence of clamor, began to deepen, not into an oppressive silence but rather a profound quietude that felt less like a lack and more like a presence. It was the sound of everything settling, the gentle exhalation of a day nearing its graceful conclusion. The air, which had held the last vestiges of the sun's warmth, now carried a subtle, almost imperceptible coolness, a whisper of the evening yet to fully arrive. This wasn't the crisp chill of autumn, nor the biting cold of winter, but a soft, lingering touch, like the memory of a hand that had just departed. It invited a slowing of the breath, a softening of the gaze, an inward turning that felt entirely natural, almost inevitable. Outside, the light continued its patient transformation. The sharp, declarative rays of midday had long since dissolved into a diffuse amber glow, painting the upper branches of the old oak in hues of bronze and burnished copper. Shadows, once short and stark, stretched long and fluid across the lawn, undulating with the slightest breeze, no longer defined edges but rather soft blurs that hinted at the coming dimness. Each leaf on the ivy-covered wall seemed to hold a tiny, private gleam, catching the last slanted light before surrendering to the deepening dusk. It was a visual symphony of surrender, a slow, gentle fading that offered no resistance, only acceptance. The world outside seemed to breathe with this rhythm, a silent, internal sigh. Distant sounds, like the far-off murmur of a car or the faint chime of a clock from a neighboring house, were absorbed by the growing quiet, muffled and rendered almost dreamlike. They became part of the texture of the stillness, not interruptions but rather fleeting embellishments, tiny ripples on a vast, calm surface. The air itself felt thicker, imbued with the scent of damp earth and the subtle sweetness of unseen blossoms, drawing one further into the sensory landscape of the moment. There was no hurry, no urging, only the gentle insistence of the present. This quietude, once fully embraced, allowed for a different kind of seeing, a more intimate connection with the simple realities of existence. The dust motes dancing in the last sliver of sun through the window became miniature galaxies, each particle a tiny world caught in a slow, celestial waltz. The faint scent of wood smoke from a distant chimney carried with it a narrative of warmth and home, conjuring images of hearths and quiet contemplation. It was a time when the superficial fell away, and the essence of things, their intrinsic nature, seemed to rise to the surface, clear and unburdened. There was a subtle pull, then, as if the deepening light was drawing the edges of the day inward, gathering its scattered threads into a soft, cohesive whole. The colors outside, no longer vibrant and distinct, began to meld into a spectrum of deepening blues and grays, preparing for the velvet shroud of night. The air grew cooler still, a gentle suggestion that it was time to move, perhaps, from one space to another, or merely to sink deeper into the quiet that now filled every corner of the world, both seen and unseen. It was an invitation, a soft, unspoken promise of rest, a lullaby whispered by the fading light. The subtle shift in the light, often imperceptible to a hurried gaze, holds a quiet testament to the enduring presence of the moment. It is not a dramatic burst, but a gradual softening, a gentle unfolding of hues that paints the edges of the world anew. One might notice it first in the way a distant tree line begins to surrender its sharp silhouette, allowing the faintest blush of dawn or the deepening lavender of dusk to seep into its form. This is not a transition that demands attention, but rather one that invites a gentle absorption, a quiet allowing for the world to simply be, and for one's own awareness to gently expand into its contours. In such a space, the air itself seems to carry a different quality. It is often cooler, infused with the fresh scent of earth or the clean breath of an approaching evening. Sounds, too, become less distinct, less urgent. The distant murmur of a stream, the almost silent rustle of leaves, the soft, barely perceptible hum of insects awakening or settling, these elements weave together into a tapestry of quietude. There is no need to filter or to interpret. The senses simply receive, open and unburdened by expectation. This receptive state, this willingness to simply witness, is where true understanding often begins to bloom, not with a sudden flash of insight, but with a slow, quiet blossoming, like a water lily unfurling its petals on a still pond. The surface of water, particularly at these quiet junctures of day, offers a profound reflection, not only of the sky above but of the inner landscape. Every ripple, every subtle current, tells a story of disturbance and then of a return to calm. A passing breeze can send shivers across its face, momentarily distorting the perfect mirroring, yet beneath these surface movements, the deep, dark body of the water remains undisturbed, holding its vast, silent depths. It is a gentle reminder that while the outer world, and indeed our own thoughts, may dance with transient movements, there exists within a core of stillness that remains untouched, patiently awaiting recognition. To observe this play of light and shadow, of motion and quietude on the water's skin, is to begin to perceive a similar rhythm within one's own being. It is in these unhurried moments that the notion of time itself seems to loosen its grip. The linearity of hours and minutes recedes, replaced by a more fluid, organic sense of passage. Each breath feels less like a step forward in a race and more like a gentle wave, rising and falling, connecting one moment to the next without urgency or demand. There is no past to regret, no future to anxiously anticipate. There is only the quiet unfolding of the present, rich with its simple details. The coolness on the skin, the delicate scent carried on the breeze, the shifting colors in the distant sky, these become the anchors, grounding awareness firmly in the now, allowing the mind to drift free from the usual moorings of worry or striving. This deliberate slowing down is not an act of resistance against the world's pace, but rather an alignment with a deeper, more natural rhythm. It is a quiet acknowledgement that true richness is often found not in accumulation, but in appreciation, not in speed, but in depth. When we allow ourselves this space, this gentle lingering, the world begins to reveal its subtle languages. The very air seems to hum with quiet wisdom, the trees stand as silent teachers of resilience and grace, and the distant horizon whispers promises of boundless possibility, all without uttering a single word. It is a listening with the heart, a seeing with the soul, a quiet settling into the gentle, continuous flow of existence. The first blush of dawn, faint as a whisper, painted the eastern sky with hues of bruised plum and rosewater. Within the quiet heart of the domus, a stillness lingered, broken only by the softest rustle of linen and the distant murmur of a slave preparing the morning brazier. Flavius, stirring on his couch, drew a breath of the cool air that had stolen in through the high windows, carrying with it the faint, clean scent of damp stone and the nascent promise of the city waking. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache of well-lived years, before rising with a slow, deliberate grace. The oil lamp, a small beacon in the dim cubiculum, cast dancing shadows on the painted frescoes that adorned the walls. Its gentle, earthy perfume mingled with the fainter aroma of wood smoke drifting from the kitchen hearth. A young slave, quiet as a shadow himself, placed a small earthenware cup of cool water and a platter of simple fare on a low table beside the lararium. Flavius offered a silent prayer to the household gods, the flickering light illuminating the small, carved figures, then broke off a piece of the day's fresh bread. It was coarse, warm, and comforting, a simple foundation for the day ahead, eaten alongside a handful of briny olives and a sliver of goat's cheese. The soft crunch of the bread was the loudest sound in the atrium, where the sky, now a pale lavender, began to unveil itself through the open roof, reflecting in the placid waters of the impluvium. He chose a plain white tunic of soft linen, its folds falling comfortably around him. There was no need for the formal toga yet. The morning was for the intimate rhythms of the household and the quiet obligations of a patron. Slaves moved with practiced ease through the domus, their hushed voices and soft footsteps barely disturbing the air. The faint, sweet scent of newly polished cedar drifted from the tablinum, where scrolls would soon be unrolled and wax tablets prepared. As the sun climbed, casting longer, softer shadows across the courtyard, the subtle shift in the city's symphony began. A distant creak of a cart wheel, the faraway cry of a hawker, the bark of a dog, muted sounds, carried on the gentle morning breeze, speaking of the forum's slow awakening. Soon, clients would begin to arrive for the salutatio, their sandals scuffing quietly on the street outside, their respectful murmurs preceding their entrance. Flavius settled himself in the atrium, awaiting them. His presence, calm and steady, was a familiar anchor for those who sought his counsel or his influence. He listened to their greetings, their quiet petitions, offering measured responses, a pillar of stability in their bustling lives. The morning passed in this gentle ebb and flow of interaction, a quiet dance of loyalty and obligation, underscored by the growing hum of the world beyond his walls. By the 6th hour, the sun hung high, a warm, golden presence that spilled freely into the atrium, warming the mosaic floor. The last of the clients had departed, their footsteps fading into the increasing crescendo of the city's midday life. The air grew still, heavy with the quiet anticipation of the day's zenith. For prandium, a light meal was brought, cold cuts of yesterday's roasted chicken, more bread, and ripe figs. Flavius ate slowly, content in the quiet respite, the sounds of the city now a steady thrum, a backdrop to his momentary peace. The afternoon, with its promise of the lively baths, stretched ahead, a welcome prospect after the gentle duties of the morning. The heat, though mild for now, whispered of the need for the cooling waters to come. The afternoon light, mellowed by dust motes dancing in the air, stretched long fingers across the floorboards. It was a patient light, unhurried in its slow descent, painting the ordinary with an extraordinary grace. Each particle, suspended in the golden shafts, seemed to hold a tiny world within its shimmer, catching and releasing the sun's warmth in an endless, quiet ballet. No sound broke the stillness save for the distant murmur of the wind through unseen leaves, a whisper that suggested vast spaces beyond the quiet confines of the room. This particular hour, nestled between the day's vibrant activity and the encroaching hush of evening, always brought with it a peculiar clarity. It was as if the softened edges of the world allowed thoughts to unfurl with less resistance, like old parchment slowly yielding its secrets. The shadows, too, were not harsh but velvety, deepening the colors of the old rug, giving a profound depth to the corners where they pooled. They were not an absence of light, but rather its gentle complement, a necessary counterpoint that defined shapes and volumes, making the presence of the light itself more keenly felt. One could spend an entire duration simply watching the slow crawl of these illuminated patterns across the wall, observing how a chair leg might transition from brilliant glow to soft obscurity. Each minute brought a subtle shift, a new composition. It was a masterclass in change, rendered with such slowness that it felt almost static, a paradox of motion and tranquility. The very act of observing this unhurried progression became a meditation, a gentle unfolding of attention that required nothing but presence. No demands were made, no urgencies pressed in. There was only the quiet permission to simply be, to absorb the gentle flux. Within this quiet space, memories often surfaced, not in a rush, but drifting up like motes in the very light I was watching. They were soft-edged and comforting echoes of other peaceful afternoons, other rooms bathed in similar golden hues. A hand held, a book read, the gentle breathing of a sleeping pet. These recollections were not vivid recreations, but rather the quiet feeling of those moments, the emotional resonance that lingered long after the specifics had faded. They were like the scent of old wood, subtle yet deeply ingrained, part of the fabric of existence. The air itself felt thicker, imbued with the quiet stories of the room, of all the years it had sheltered thought and dream. It was a subtle weight, not oppressive, but comforting, like a well-worn blanket. There was a sense of continuity in this quiet watching, a link to all the quiet watchers who had come before, and to those who would follow. The light would continue its journey, the shadows would lengthen, and the dust motes would dance, regardless of who witnessed them. And in that steady, unchanging rhythm, there was a profound peace, a reminder that some beauty exists simply for its own sake, asking for nothing but gentle acknowledgement. The world outside might quicken, but in this space, time held its breath, allowing for a quiet, unfolding grace.